Hello and welcome to Thundertula Safari Camp, where we happily call the Timbavati Private Nature Reserve our home. Us at Thundertula, we've been trying to think about new ways to keep you all interested during sort of the global shutdown that we're all facing at the moment, global lockdown, isolation, whatever it is that you want to call it. We are just very lucky to have a good few thousand hectares to lock down in, which means that we can hopefully keep you entertained, not only through sofa safaris, solo safaris, but also through sofa photography. And that's where I come in. My name is Luke, for those of you that don't know me, and if you're wondering why I'm holding this camera like this, it's because it's my baby, and it's just one of them at least. I shouldn't say that too loudly because the other baby's in the bag, but yeah, they are kind of like your baby. And for anyone that is a photographer that takes it as seriously as myself or Chad, you'll know what I mean. You kind of just want to hold them close all the time. They cost as much as a baby as well, and I don't just mean that first year, I mean from sort of birth until the age of 21 when they hopefully leave home. So yeah, they are expensive things to get into, but they don't have to be as expensive as myself and Chad would make things, because it is a pretty big investment. But anyway, this is sofa photography, and over the coming weeks, months, years, however long we can draw this out, however long you stay entertained, we will keep bringing this series to you once a week, and I will be discussing all the ins and outs of wildlife photography in particular. So from the gear that you should use, the gear that I use, the software, the computers, how to get the shot, how to use aperture priority, shutter priority, manual, how not to use auto, because don't use auto, but yeah, all those good things we're going to try and wrap into this photography series, and with a true focus on wildlife photography. There's loads of photographic based YouTube things you can check out there, lots that I would recommend, but this one will be exclusively focused on wildlife photography. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be a wedding photographer or a product photographer or a model photographer. I don't know too much about how to get those subjects perfectly, but what I do know is a thing or two about wildlife photography. So if that's something that interests you, then stick around over the coming months, the coming weeks, the coming whatever years, and hopefully I can keep you entertained, as I say. And just like our Sofa Safari series, you're always welcome to post comments, questions. I ask if you do enjoy it, to like and to share, and yeah, let's go on a photographic journey together in the beautiful Timbavati Private Nature Reserve. So you've just booked your first safari to Thundertula Safari Camp. We can't wait to have you, but the thoughts just crossed your mind, how are you going to capture all the memories and all the amazing wildlife that you're about to see? Now, a lot of people, the first thing they think of is this, and that's not a bad thing to think of either, because the most important camera is the one that you have on you. And just about every smartphone in the world, actually every smartphone in the world, has some cameras at the back. I say cameras because it seems to be the trend these days to have 17 of them. But this one has two. It's got a zoom lens and a wide angle, which is great. So it gets you a little bit of zoom and films very nicely, and it does the job for the most part, I guess. But when you compete or compare this to one of the big cameras that I'm about to show you, or some of the other options I'm about to show you, it very quickly falls away. And so some of you might get away with just bringing your iPhone or your Galaxy or whatever it is, whatever brand that you went with, along with you on safari. But what we find is a lot of people actually come here thinking this will get them through, and then pining for something a bit better. So think about it before you arrive, and hopefully this video will help you do that, and this series will help you do that. So don't forget the humble smartphone, but let's look at things that are maybe a bit better. Now, what myself and Britt have done, as we've gone and set up this beautiful scene for you all over here, with all of the gear that we could possibly bring out for you, and I'm going to go through it with you. So we'll start with the cameras. Forget about the bags for now and the tripods and all those weird things going on. Let's just chat about the cameras. All right, so the first camera I have for you today is a bridge camera. Now, what sets a bridge camera apart from one of these little guys is obviously that nice big lens. All right, so bridge cameras, you can't remove the lens. They're attached, you know, they do their thing. It's a one-hit wonder, if you will. They have great auto settings. It's perfect for people that just want to run and gun and just want a happy, snappy. That's going to work out perfectly for you. But what you find with most bridge cameras these days is they actually have things that are very similar to the big professional bodies. So you can change this one to manual, you can change it to shutter, auto, and so on. And they also have the zoom built in. Now this one here zooms to about 600 millimeters, and I'd say if you're in the market for a relatively inexpensive bridge camera, then I would say get one that at least zooms to about 300 or 400 mils and you should be fine. All right, 300-400 mils is kind of the sweet spot for wildlife photography, but more on that later. So this is a bridge camera, the inexpensive way to get into photography. You do get smaller things called compact cameras, but I really wouldn't recommend those. Rather just bring your phone if you're going to do something like that. But if you're going to look at a bridge camera, I'd highly recommend that over your phone. They also film, they zoom, they're great. They'll get you through. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about a DSLR, which you've all heard about. You've seen them at weddings, you've seen them at your friends' braais or birthday parties. Now, for those of you that don't know what a braai is, it's a fancy South African name for a barbecue. All right, we just do it better than all of you. But this is a DSLR, and you'll see at the front it's got nothing. All right, it's got no lens. And the main feature of a DSLR is to be able to change lenses. Right, so you can change it to a wide angle lens, you can change it to a 400mm lens where you're getting very narrow scope of view but very zoomed in on your subject. So that's its main claim to fame. All right, DSLRs are usually big. They're great for people that have big hands. They're great for you if you're looking for something that's ergonomic, something that you can hold in your hand for a long time. Maybe not so great for you if you have quite small hands, or if you don't like holding things that are a bit big or maybe a bit heavy. All right, this is a Nikon D810. It's my baby. I love it, and it weighs just over 1 kilogram by itself, or just under 1 kilogram by itself. I don't know, I haven't weighed it in a while. But yeah, that's a DSLR, and if you're worrying about all the Nikon branding going on, we're not sponsored by them, just myself and Britt are into the Nikon brand. It's kind of like being into computers. You buy into the ecosystem, and once you're there, you stay. But we love Nikon, it does what we need it to do. But if you're a Canon, a Sony, a Fuji, whatever shooter, your gear is perfectly fine. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. It matters who's behind it, not what's in front of it. All right, well, what's in front of it does matter, but you get what I'm saying. Right, next up we've got the mirrorless system. So these are all the rage at the moment. And if I bring the DSLR back, you'll see the size difference between the two. Now this is Britt's Nikon Z6, and this is what she primarily uses to film our sofa safaris, but she's going to do a full video on that at some point. And you can see at the moment it's got a lens attached to it. Now with the mirrorless bodies, they can also have the lens detach and another lens put on. I'm not going to open it now because you should never open your lenses, or open your camera at least, when you're in a natural environment where there's dust floating around, because that dust gets inside there, gets onto your sensor, leads to all sorts of hassles. So please try and avoid doing that, but we'll cover that in another video at some point. So those are the two pro sort of options. These are now getting more and more expensive, away from the bridge camera and up into the more professional or more enthusiast grade cameras. Right, DSLR, mirrorless. Let me put those back down on the beautiful Land Rover and move on to the lenses. All right, so let me quickly show you my other DSLR. So this is my Nikon D810, and attached to it is a 200 to 400mm f4 lens. All right, this is a professional zoom lens. That's why it's so big. There's a lot of glass going on in here to give it detail, to give it crispness, and to give it great contrast. It is a zoom lens, so I can spin the wheel and it will zoom, but the barrel doesn't extend like lenses that we used to. It's looking so big because it's got a lens hood on it. If I take that off, that's the actual size of the lens there. But the lens hood just gives it a little bit of protection and also avoids getting solar flares and things like that. So yeah, that's what a DSLR looks like with a mighty big lens attached to it. And this is one of the professional lenses. Now I hope you can see it because it is camouflaged. So you might just be seeing a camera, but because I'm holding it, maybe you can pick up on that. All right, so next up we're going to turn our attention to these two lenses over here. So there's two of them. This one is a 70 to 200mm f2.8 lens. This is also a professional grade lens, but it is very sharp, it's very clear, it's very fast to focus as well. That 2.8 aperture also gives you those beautiful milky backgrounds while bringing your subject into perfect clarity. It's a phenomenal lens. This is my favorite lens, but we'll get more into this a little bit later. The next lens I'm going to show you is Britt's daily shooter. This is an 80 to 400mm lens, and it's a lens like this that I would suggest most people go with. You know, with the Canon side you get 100 to 400mm, Sony also does 100 to 400mm, Nikon does a 80 to 400mm, so a little bit more versatile, but they're all in that same range. Great lens, great sharpness. Yeah, all around great cost-effective way to photograph wildlife. As you can see though, in contrast to the big 200 to 400mm lens, this 80 to 400 does extend. All right, so it does get bigger as you zoom it out, which or zoom it in, which is kind of also a difference between a professional grade lens and something that is a bit more enthusiast grade. And this is what I would say is enthusiast grade. But the price difference between a lens like this and that big daddy over there is phenomenal. So if you're not going to be going into photography from a professional standpoint, I would highly recommend getting something in this range rather than something big like that. They're heavy, they're expensive, they're hard to service, they work amazingly, and they hardly ever break, but this would be the go-to in my opinion. So that covers the lenses, the cameras, you know, all the fun stuff. Let's move on to a couple of other interesting goodies. As you can see up there on the bonnet, we've got a tripod. And these tripods these days they make them out of carbon fiber. I mean, this thing's super light, but it's also very strong. And if you plan on doing a bit of time lapsing, a bit of landscape photography, maybe extended shutter times, this would be the go-to. Okay, they are very good, but they do not work very well on the back of a game viewing vehicle or a safari vehicle because they stretch out quite far. Alright, so you don't have that much leg room on these vehicles, and this would just not work too well. But if you plan to do a lot of stuff from on the ground, the sun setting, stuff like that, this would be a great thing to have to bring along with you. They fold up quite compactly, they come with a bag, and you can usually get them on and off the plane with you, with your camera gear at the same time. So yeah, great thing to have, but not necessary. The second is a monopod. This is maybe a little bit more necessary for those of you that are coming out on safari for the first time and you don't want to take the full weight of one of these cameras. And believe me, even with a mirrorless camera, when you have a big lens attached, it still is quite a heavy thing to operate. So a monopod just extends, and you can plant that onto the base of the vehicle with your camera attached, and you can take this can take the weight of the camera while you have your hands free to just work with the camera settings and what you need. So yeah, a monopod, a lot more cost effective as well, and it just folds up quite nicely. Super easy to put in your bag, and something I would probably recommend highly for those of you coming on safari with your camera gear. Right, next up we've got a couple of bags. We've got my bag here on the floor. That is my Low Pro Whistler 450, something like that. It's a great bag. It fits all of my gear in there. It's also got a waterproof compartment, so I can keep a Camelback with some water in there and keep that separate from my camera should that leak. And it's just made for hiking. It's a great bag. We'll get more into bag reviews in later videos, but in contrast, this is Brit's bag. Hers is also a Low Pro. This one's made a bit more for maybe journalism, something like that, not people that are going to go hiking and so on. That one's a bit more comfortable for hiking. This one's a bit more useful. It's got a lot more pockets, it's got a laptop sleeve, it's got all sorts of compartments that you can use for your cables and whatnot, whereas my one is more adapted to hiking and carrying your gear long distances. But they both fit everything we need. If you can imagine, all of this camera gear you see there just packs away very neatly into these bags. So yeah, that's it, from the smartphone to the bridge camera to the DSLR, the mirrorless, the lenses involved, the tripods, the monopods, the bags. There's a whole lot more gear that we can talk about, and we hope to bring all that gear to your eyes. But for now, if you have any questions or any comments, please post them below. And if you're enjoying this series and you want to see where we take it, if you have any recommendations or requests you might want to put across to me, feel free to do so. We look forward to interacting with you. Anyway, until the next Sofa Photography, see ya.